Well, it's been a few days since I have read from the Twits. This is actually day 4 of my reading, and I didn't want you to forget about these two crazy people, so I thought today would be a great day to read the next section, and it's called The Great Upside Down Monkey Circus. Now for the monkeys. The 4 monkeys in the cage in the garden were all one family. They were Mugglewump and his wife and their 2 small children. But what on earth were Mr. and Mrs. Twit doing with monkeys in their garden? Well, in the old days they had both worked in a circus as monkey trainers. They used to teach monkeys to do tricks and to dress up in human clothes and to smoke pipes and all the rest of that nonsense. Today, although they were retired, Mr. Twit still wanted to train monkeys. It was his dream that one day he would own the first great upside-down monkey circus in the world. That meant that the monkeys had to do everything upside down. They had to dance upside down, on their hands with their feet in the air. They had to play, let me get this picture so you can see this. They had to play football. There we go. They had to play football upside down. They had to balance one on top of the other upside down, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest baby monkey at the very top. They even had to eat and drink upside down, and that is not an easy thing to do, because the food and water has to go up your throat instead of down it. In fact, it is almost impossible, but the monkeys simply had to do it, otherwise they got nothing. All this sounds pretty silly to you and me. It sounded pretty silly to the monkeys, too. They absolutely hated having to do this upside-down nonsense day after day. It made them giddy sometimes, standing on their heads for hours on end. Sometimes the 2 small monkey children would faint with so much blood going to their heads. But Mr. Twit didn't care about that. He kept them practicing for 6 hours every day, and if they didn't do as they were told, Mrs. Twit would soon come running with her beastly stick. They are not nice. The roly-poly bird to the rescue. Mugglewump and his family longed to escape from the cage in Mr. Twit's garden and go back to the African jungle where they came from. They hated Mr. and Mrs. Twit for making their lives so miserable. They also hated them for what they did to the birds every Tuesday and Wednesday. "Fly away, birds," they used to shout, jumping about in the cage and waving their arms. "Don't sit on that big dead tree. It's just been smeared all over with sticky glue. Go and sit somewhere else." But these were English birds, and they couldn't understand the weird African language the monkeys spoke. So they took no notice and went on using the big dead tree and getting caught for Mrs. Twit's bird pie. Now, to see the whole picture, because this is a bigger picture. Then one day a truly magnificent bird flew down out of the sky and landed on the monkey cage. "Good heavens!" cried all the monkeys together. "It's the roly-poly bird. What on earth are you doing over here in England, roly-poly bird?" Like the monkeys, the roly-poly bird came from Africa, and he spoke the same language as they did. "I've come for a holiday," said the roly-poly bird. "I like to travel." He fluffed his marvelous colored feathers and looked down rather grandly at the monkeys. "For most people," he went on, "flying away on holiday is very expensive, but I can fly anywhere in the world for nothing." "Do you know how to talk to these English birds?" Mugglewump asked him. "Of course I do," said the roly-poly bird. "It's no good going to a country and not knowing the language." "Then we must hurry," said Mugglewump. "Today is Tuesday, and over there you can already see the revolting Mr. Twit up the ladder painting sticky glue on all the branches of the big dead tree. This evening, when the birds come in to roost, you must warn them not to perch on that tree, or they will be made into bird pie." That evening the roly bird flew around and around the big tree, singing out, "There's sticky stick stuff all over the tree. If you land in the branches, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in a hot bird pie." No bird pie for Mr. Twit. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket to snatch all the birds from the big dead tree, there wasn't a single one on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird was there as well, and Mugglewump and his family were inside the cage, and the whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. Still no bird pie for Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favorite meal. So that very same day, he went after the birds again. This time he smeared all the top bars of the monkey cage with a sticky glue, as well as the branches of the big dead tree. Now I'll get you, he said, whichever one you sit on. The monkeys crouched inside the cage, watching all this, and later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping in for an evening chat, they shouted out, "Don't land on our cage, roly-poly bird. It's covered with sticky glue, so is the tree." And that evening, as the sun went down and all the birds came in again to roost, the roly-poly bird flew around and around the monkey cage and the big dead tree, singing out his warning. "There's sticky stuff now on the cage and the tree. If you land on either, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in a hot bird pie." Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. Oh, this can't be good. Can make it a little bigger. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. Look at him. He is not happy. "I'll wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in the pot for bird pie before this day is out." "How are you going to do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who had come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit went very close to Mrs. Twit and lowered his voice so that neither the birds nor monkeys should hear. Just waiting for the phone. "I've got a great idea," he said. "We'll both go into town right away, and we'll buy a gun each. How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go, and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention!" he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it. One on top of the other. Quick! Get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit's stick across your backsides." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Muggle-Wump at the bottom and the smallest child at the very top. I don't like that, Mr. Twit. "Now, stay there till we come back," Mr. Twit ordered. "Don't you dare to move, and don't overbalance. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you all in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. Muggle-Wump has an idea. As soon as Mr. and Mrs. Twit had disappeared down the road, the monkeys all flipped back onto their feet and right way up. "Quick, get the key," Muggle-Wump called out to Roly-Poly Bird, who was still sitting on the roof of the house. "What key?" shouted the Roly-Poly Bird. "The key to the door of our cage," cried Muggle-Wump. "It's hanging on a nail in the work shed. That's where he always puts it." The Roly-Poly Bird flew down and came back with the key in his beak. Muggle-Wump reached a hand through the bars of the cage and took the key. He put it in the lock and turned it. The door opened. All 4 monkeys leapt out together. "We're free!" cried the 2 little ones. "Where shall we go, Dad? Where shall we hide?" "Don't get excited," said Muggle-Wump. "Calm down, everybody. Before we escape from this beastly place, we have one very, very important thing to do." "What?" they asked him. "We're going to turn those terrible twits upside down." "We're going to what?" they cried. "You must be joking, Dad." "I'm not joking," Muggle-Wump said. "We're going to turn both Mr. and Mrs. Twit upside down with their legs in the air." "Don't be ridiculous," the Roly-Poly Bird said. "How can we possibly turn those 2 maggoty old monsters upside down?" We can, cried Mugglewump. We're going to make them stand on their heads for hours and hours, perhaps forever. Let them see what it feels like for a change. How? Said the roly-poly bird. Just tell me how. Mugglewump laid his head on one side, and a tiny twinkly little smile touched the corners of his mouth. Now and again, he said, but not very often, I have a brilliant idea. This is one of them. Follow me, my friends, follow me. He scampered off toward the house, and the 3 other monkeys and the roly-poly bird went after him. Buckets and paintbrushes, cried Mugglewump. That's what we want next. There are plenty in the workshed. Hurry up, everyone. Get a bucket and a paintbrush. Inside Mr. Twits' workshed, there was an enormous barrel of hug-tight sticky glue and stuff he used for catching birds. Fill your buckets, Mugglewump ordered. We're now going into the big house. Mrs. Twit had hidden the key to the front door. Let me just make this a little bigger so you can see it. To the front door under the mat, and Mugglewump had seen her doing it, so it was easy for them to get in. In they went, all 4 monkeys, with their buckets of sticky glue. Then came the roly-poly bird flying in after them, with a bucket in his beak and a brush in his claw. Well, we'll read about The Great Glue Painting Begins next time.